Good evening, everybody. It is Joanne with For Better, For Worse.
And Nancy with For Your Canine. How are you?
Nancy's doing donuts in the
exciting. Yes. I am on my way home from a trial. So hope you're all having a good evening because it's a little bit hectic today. So today what we're going to talk about is wellness and behavior. It's one of those things that it's overlooked a lot of times at times with behavior problems. I cannot tell you how many times we've had a behavior problem, quote unquote, come in, and it really wasn't a behavior issue, it was a medical issue. So one of the things you want to think about before you deem things a behavior issue is really make sure that the dog's health or wellness is on check and on point before you take it to the trainer, take it to the doctor first. So, and sometimes we recognize things, and sometimes we my first experience was many years ago. I had a dog come in they wanted to train it to be able to stay at a kennel, and the dog was really scared and shy and everything like that, and and as soon as the dog came in, I know that dog has a thyroid problem. And so there was no training to be done. I sent her to her vet. She did check the thyroid. Sure enough, that's what it was. They put her on thyroid medication, and she didn't need any training. She was totally fine. So there you go. Sometimes it's that simple. Not always, but sometimes it is.
Yeah, and I think there's so many pieces to this topic. One for me is when we get presented with aggression cases, especially when the dog has been fine, right, for a prolonged period of time, and all of a sudden kind of starts lashing out, or is biting, or any of those things. That's kind of one of the first things we want to see is does the dog have any pain, right? Does the dog have any places that are painful or causing them some anxiety, and that's why they're kind of lashing out, like, hey, stop, don't touch me there, and you're not listening and it hurts, so I will use my teeth if I have to keep you away from that area.
Right. And just so you know, with especially going along that with aggression, dogs aren't perfectly fine for years, and then they decide that they're going to bite. I mean, it just doesn't happen like that. You have a perfectly normal, happy dog, and all of a sudden they decide to bite. 9 times out of 10, it's always a medical issue, right?
Yes, Deb, Nancy is going to be the spooky floating head this week. It's not going to be me.
I'm only spooky and floating for a little while, guys. Sorry.
I know. I was on the highway. She's in the city, so at least you get like waves of her lighting up her face. So Nancy, Aaron asked, what behavior ended up being the thyroid issue? Like, what did they notice? What did you notice that ended up?
Oh, fear. The dog was really afraid of certain things, and it was really shy, and all of a sudden it was fearful, and that usually you see that very often in thyroid issues is fear. They were worried about, like, a dog that was not worried about much, and then all of a sudden was, right? My little Indy was totally fine, not worried about anything, and about a year into having him, he all of a sudden was starting to hide, and it was just weird stuff like that. And sure enough, his thyroid was low, and his dog was more classic symptoms, meaning she had terrible coat. She was really, her thyroid had been bad for a long time, so it was a little bit more. It was fear, but it was also it also came across, because when I saw her come in the door, I knew she had thyroid issues. It was pretty easy to read that. So
yeah, and just so you guys know, I mean, I've been in Dobermans for a very long time. It's just so prevalent in the breed. I think probably 60% of Dobermans end up with hypothyroidism at some point in their life. And people always ask, well, how do you tell, right? And I think what Nancy's saying is these first symptoms of just they're a little they're a little bit more fearful, and sometimes it's so subtle you might not notice. You're right, like what is that? You've never been afraid of that. Come on, let's go. And the dog's like, oh, okay. And as it gets lower and lower, right, they get this coat. It's almost like they haven't been bathed in a year. They get kind of that grimy, dirty coat. Sometimes the coat thins out. This one's really hard to explain, but the skin sometimes, if it's really, really low, gets like this putty, weird, sticky feeling to it. It's almost like it's like Play-Doh-y skin. It's very funny. So those are all kind of signs and symptoms. Now, I mean, I'll tell you, outside of, your dog might not be feeling quite right. There's not a ton of side effects to a low thyroid, right? So there is a lot of side effects to a thyroid that's too high. But
Yeah.
And Gene Dodds is actually one of the people out there who spent a lot of time and research on hypothyroidism and just basically the thyroid health itself. And she's really done a lot of research to see breed types are different. So like, I'll tell you, if you send it to her and it's within low normal range, that is low for a Doberman. So it's kind of a range for all dogs. And then there's certain breeds that just kind of fall a little different from that. So a lot of vets will not want to start you on a thyroid medication if they're still within normal ranges. And I'll even give you a really weird story. So Noah, my Vizsla, this is very funny. Nancy and I are sort of helicopter mom freaks when it comes to dog health, right? We just notice the smallest things. So this is kind of funny. I took my dog to the vet because I noticed just this small hint of fear. And on top of that, his testicles had gotten smaller over the course of 12 months. Over the course of a year, they had gotten smaller. And from 3 to 4. So this isn't really something that would be happening like right after, his adolescence, something like that. So he had a wonderful day at the vet with some blood draws and a lot of messing around on his back end. And sure enough, his T4 came back very low normal. And so I asked for a full panel and everything came back low normal. So we did start him on a small bit. And when I had him in the vet for that, they found a heart murmur. So, I went and got that checked out as well. And so it seems to have been leveling out. But just those teeny tiny little things, that's kind of the very first sign, right? Those little fear things is what I find is a really first sign of thyroid.
Yeah, for sure. And in some breeds, some dogs, more lethargic, sleeping a little more. And sometimes, depending on the dog's age, people mistake that for just getting older. And sometimes it's not. It's something else, right? So just things to look for. But fear usually of being worried about things that they weren't worried about before is the biggest sign, that something's not quite right.
Oh, neat. Mary Engstrom says her Shiba Koshu had a before and after photo in Gene Dodds' book, along with the story of his odd presentation of symptoms. Yeah, thyroid can be one of those really weird things that it's not the same for every dog. It's not like this is the presentation of something. And then
well,
Tim,
that's like for people too.
Yep, exactly. And Tim has a real nice comment. And Tim, I 100% agree with you. He says, my dog wasn't searching quite right in nose work, and he ended up having a mast cell tumor on his neck that he found. I don't know about you, Nance. I'm sure it's true, but I have found so many things in my nose work students where I'm like, what's wrong with your dog? Right? And they're like, what do you mean? Right. It's like, something's off. I've caught, I caught a thyroid. I've caught a bad tooth. I caught some cancers. It's just been, you hate when you see it, but I always say something to hopefully give some early insight, like, hey, you might kind of want to go run some blood work or something like that, or just double check your dog.
Right.
What have you seen, Nance?
Yep. Well, I don't have Dobermans, but I've been around them enough to know. And there's a wonderful person in Minnesota. I was teaching at nosework camp, and I said, hey, so how long has your dog had wobblers? And she goes, what do you mean? So it had been, she didn't know. I noticed the dog's movement because I've seen that before many times. And I saw her, fast forward 8 months later, I saw her at a trial, and she told me, she goes, "You were right. That's what he had, was wobblers," which I wish I would have been wrong about that, because that stinks. Um, but I have caught a lot of, you know, luckily, a lot of my students are a lot like me, helicopter mommy that way. But usually, like, if they play too hard, tweaking some thyroids. So there's always something, and I always notice just different things in the dogs, because it's like you see them every week and you know what's normal, and then you notice when it's not normal, right? So
Yep.
so those are things that and then I also, especially when I deal with behavior cases, I always find out medically what's happening or what's going on, because a lot of people just think that it shouldn't matter, and it does quite matter a lot. So when there's a behavior case with aggression and all that, I always find out, was he always this way? Did it just come on subtly? Things like that are always really important questions to ask.
Right. Oh no, we've seen it for years. He's done this for years is a very different answer than no. He never bit anyone his whole life, and all of a sudden, right, he had this big shift. You're like,
Yeah.
something's
And
going on.
And a few years ago, I had a dog present for aggression for biting his people. And when he came to me, we found out that he didn't have any peripheral vision. So if you think about it, nobody was there, and then somebody was there, so it scared the hell out of her. So yeah, it was a pretty easy fix, right? We just said, okay, just let her know you're coming. Just, as you come up on the dog, just let her know you're coming, and it took care of the problem. You couldn't resolve the vision problem, but you can resolve how you handled it.
Right. And I had one as simple as the dog was been fine, loves our kids, does great with her. I mean, it was with our kids all the time, bit the little girl in the face. And, upon checking out the dog, I noticed the dog couldn't actually lift its head much more than 15, 20 degrees. And I said, did your daughter hug the dog? Yep. Touched the dog on the neck, and bam, that's when the bite occurred. So took the dog to a chiropractor, big old pop. Dog's back to normal, totally fine after one adjustment. I mean, they did continue on to make sure, right, it didn't come back. But yeah, so something as simple as, ouch, my neck is out can cause something as a severe bite, right? Deb, what do you tell a vet when your dog is just off and you want a checkup? That, right? That's exactly what you should tell your vet, which is, listen, I know my dog really, really well. If you can describe what you're seeing, even if it doesn't seem like it makes any sense medically, tell your vet, right? But yeah, when you say, something's different, something's off, this piece of, he's a little more fearful, he's scared of the dark now, he's whatever it is, he's a little slower, he's sleeping more. Most of the general things your vet is going to do is they're going to do, a physical exam, and they might recommend some blood work. A lot of times that's not cheap, but boy, it's a good way to catch anything that's going on. And if they don't find anything and you still feel like your dog is off, do not feel like you're crazy. Go back, right? Give it a couple weeks, but go back and say, hey, I really want you to continue looking, because whatever it is not fixed. Smidge has hypothyroidism, not all of the classic symptoms. She had extreme sound reaction, lesson learned, try everything. Yeah, exactly right. And that's one of those things, like thyroid can just present itself in so many different ways.
Right. Well, and being a human that has thyroid, yeah, it's a thing. So
yeah, where is a good dog chiropractor? Oh gosh, well, Blanca, where are you from? Because I know we're in different places, so we'd have different answers. And I'm sure a lot of the viewers here tonight definitely use a chiro, so they could be of help too, if you can kind of just give us a general area of where you're at. Yeah, Cheryl, my vet, I kept a log for my vet of things that weren't right, and then over time to be able to see any patterns that were different. Yeah, so Blanca's near Chicago. I don't know, Nancy, you were in Chicago, or if anybody else has a good chiro, you can put it in the comments.
Yep, we have a lot. Dr. Legitis, we have a lot.
Oh yeah, Dr. Rosemary.
Yeah, Dr. Rosemary is fan-freaking-tastic. She's awesome. And the vet clinics she's at in Hanover Park is fantastic as well. So they have a lot other chiros there that are super. So.
Yep. Mary, you're right. Normal, if you have normal video and then you compare it, sometimes videos really is a great way. And definitely things that a vet can see that you can't really describe. So, all right. So thyroid we could go on for an hour about thyroid issues for sure. But so one of the other things Nancy's gonna, I know she just got home, so she's probably gonna be kind of off and on here for a minute till she gets seated. But one of the other ones that I wanted to talk about is just kind of basic help. Whenever your dog is vomiting or has diarrhea, okay, just like you, right? If you are a human and you're throwing up for more than a couple days, you're like, I have to go in. This is not normal. And so dogs, even, I would not wait more than 48 hours. If they have not stopped vomiting, I probably wouldn't even wait 48, honestly. But if they puke once or twice and that's over the course of 2 days, sure. But if they're throwing up all the time, you need to get in right away. It's not normal. There's a lot of reasons for that. I think one of the most common reasons would be an obstructional blockage. And the longer you wait, the more tissue dies. And the harder recovery is, the more intestine they have to take out. Basically, the sicker your dog gets. And so I'll give you an example of this. I had the Doberman, the very, very expensive Doberman. And as a puppy, he was ravenous. So, I mean, I just knew just from bringing him home, this dog loved food. I mean, he dove into that food bowl with such vigor. And he sort of like picked around his food. About 17 weeks old. He's just sort of picking at his food. And then he had a little bit of just runny stool, and then he threw up, and he threw up again. And that was it. Like, that was maybe 4 hours long. And I was like, we're going to the vet. So we got in there, and of course, what did they do? A parvo test. And they said, this is the funniest. They said, this is the highest load of parvo we've ever seen a dog look so good. And I was like, well, I'm not waiting, right? And so because I had got him in, I got to do home care. He didn't have to spend any time at the vet. And he thankfully overcame it. And no worse for the wear now, but how scary was that, right? If I had just gone, oh, he probably ate something bad, or, oh, he's just not feeling good. Even 12 hours waiting with such a nasty infection like parvo, the longer you wait, the more susceptible your dog is to get worse. Okay. And, again, the expensive Doberman, same thing, right? That dog, once he was back to health, never missed a meal. So the first time he picked at his food again, I'm like, what is wrong with you? And, I had just noticed he threw up. I didn't even wait. It was those two things. We were on our way to the emergency clinic. And, she had said to me, she goes, well, it hasn't even been 24 hours. Like, I might open him up and not find anything. I'm like, I'm willing to take that risk. You go ahead. And sure enough, they found a squeaker in there. So I just knew that something was wrong with him. Right. So, and that just came with, he threw up, right? That my dog he refused his food, number one, which was huge. And he threw up. So, okay, let's see. We had some other questions. Another way. Yeah. So you guys are still talking about chiropractors. Yep. Perfect. Oh, there's hold on. Okay. Fido.
I know. I can't even. I love him. But hi, everybody. I'm home.
So I don't know if you were listening. Were you listening to us?
Yes, I was listening.
Okay. So yes, vomiting, and then diarrhea is another one. I think you can wait a little longer with diarrhea because sometimes that can be like we fed them too many rich treats, or they got into something, or oh my God, I remember my dog learned how to open the fridge she was an old lady, and she ate 4 pounds of pulled pork, and she looked like she was about to birth 14 puppies. And I tried to make her throw up. She was like, nope. And she wouldn't let any of that go. I'm keeping it all.
I worked hard for it. I'm keeping it all.
She did. And let me tell you, that dog for like a couple days, Nah, she wouldn't even poop either. She had a couple days of runny stool, but like, okay, that is totally explainable, right? Like if it didn't get better, I would be worried maybe there was some pancreatitis or something like that starting. But she was acting normal outside of like having to release a whole lot of pork fat from her belly. So, no lethargy, no wanting to sleep or be, I mean, she was very lethargic for 2 days, just waiting to birth that pulled pork. So, but yeah, so, diarrhea is another thing. And I can't tell you how many clients I hear like, yeah, his stool's always runny. Okay, especially young dogs, right? Well, we have to adjust the food then, right? Maybe your kibble's too rich, or maybe there's something in it. Maybe it's an allergy. So there are always reasons for that. The body's not meant to do that.
Yeah. And don't forget about the second brain in your stomach, right? So a dog that has a constant stomach issues, training and working with, it's like you constantly having a bad belly all the time. So it's one of those things, learning, if your dog is having diarrhea and things like that, it's really learning and training gets a little tougher, right? Because they're not feeling well. The other thing too is you want to, if dog, especially those of you who do dog sports, if you have a dog that goes to a trial or goes to a seminar or workshop and the stress of just being there gives them diarrhea, that's a lot of information, right? Like your dog really gets stressed out going to these places. So you might want to work on that stuff first before you worry about competing, or some people say, well, my dog has diarrhea for 2 days after I come back from a trial or a trip, if they can't travel that well. So you really are asking a lot of a dog that is having so much trouble with traveling that then their stomach gets pretty messed up. It's like people. There are people that any change in their environment or any change, they don't do well. They get sick to their stomach. So you want to know if that's normal. Like, I'll be honest, my dogs don't ever have diarrhea, and they don't ever have they have good appetites. Now I have 2 old dogs that are not doing well, so they have some so their appetite isn't what it was, but there's an explanation for that, right? They're not well. They're, one of them is in kidney failure, the one has a heart condition. So the truth is, their eating is off, and that's normal because of what they've got going on. So
yep. So Judy, I just wanted to address this. I don't think it's the different water from the travel. It's actually the stress and all the chemicals that stress creates causes that, right? So, because like Nancy was saying, right, and maybe we can do another Facebook Live just on that, which really that second brain is in the gut. There are more neural pathways in your gut than there are in your brain.
Yes.
So, when you have stress, you think about how that affects you mentally. If there's more of that in your gut, of course, that's going to come out some way. And Deb, it's a loaded question, and I'm honestly going to give the answer that is not going to be great, which is ask your vet. Because there is a dosing for hydrogen peroxide. There is a dosing for how to do that. However, there's not every reason is to make your dog throw up, right? There's certain reasons you absolutely would not want them to puke, right? So, I mean, especially different things that they've eaten too. So to give you that list safely of like, well, if they eat this, then yes, throw up. If they don't, or if they eat this, then don't throw up. Mm-hmm. There's just a lot of different things. So I'm reluctant to give advice on that, right? So I would say, talk to your vet and just say, hey, if I have a dog that really likes to eat stuff, can you give me some safe advice on how to make that happen?
Right. Yeah, because it depends on your dog, and also certain, depending on what they get into or whatever, you can make it worse instead of better by making them throw up. So if they got into something or whatever, then it gets a little bit more complicated. And also if they ingested something, sometimes making them throw up is not a good idea. So you definitely talk to your vet about that. And also, so I had
my shepherd ate part of a tennis ball, and I knew I wasn't sure, but I was pretty sure it was him. And they, luckily it was a small enough amount that making him throw up was okay and wouldn't have caused any additional problems, right? But depends on the size of your dog and all that can get kind of dicey. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah. As far as eating things, though, I will give you a piece of advice. If your dog ever does swallow something sharp, maybe they swallowed a thumbtack or a paper clip or something with a sharp edge, something that's not going to harm them is you feed them a piece of bread. Okay. And the bread is actually, as it gets wet in the stomach, it usually will surround that item and kind of help to protect those sharp edges from anything like that. But you're still going to want to check with your vet and make sure, and they're going to give you the symptoms of watch for any kind of perforation in the stomach or intestines. So, anything that we do, right, to kind of as a first defense, it doesn't mean we're not still calling the vet, right, to get the best care. We're just trying to do sometimes our helpful tips on the way to the vet.
Right. My cat is just out of his mind. He missed me evidently today. Anyway, so the other thing that we wanted to chat a little bit about is pain. Sometimes usually when we notice it as trainers is a lot of panting, especially if the weather isn't bad, isn't that hot. It's very odd that a dog with good weather is going to be panting. Usually panting is a sign of pain. So whether that be from arthritis or whatever. So those are things that you can kind of catch at home, right? If your dog's panting and it's pretty cool and it's not that hot, you need to maybe look into that. That's odd because usually they don't just pant to pant. And if they're panting, there's usually pain associated with it. So that's a big indicator.
And the other thing too is licking, or if you notice your dog like licking a certain area, paws and stuff like that that can be multiple things. That can be allergies, that can be other things, but it can also be pain. I know sometimes dogs who might have some sort of neck compressions, their neck's out, they need to see a chiropractor. It can present with almost, when your hands or feet fall asleep, like you've been sitting on something too long, that can happen to dogs as well. And so they'll do some licking, like this feels funny, right? And so they're just kind of licking to make that feeling go away. They don't have, they're not going to take a paw and rub an area that hurts. So that's what they do, is they lick a lot of times.
Yeah, absolutely.
So one of the other things to really, really watch for is in terms of pain as well, especially if maybe a dog has something that's not super painful, but it's really, really located, right? So it's okay unless you touch it. If your dog has a big old head whip, right? I mean, they're doing like that 180 whoosh, turn around head whip on you when you touch, say, their hip or their knee or their top of their tail, right? That's something that should really be noticeable to you. Okay. And I might want to more gently try and touch that area and see if you kind of get that head turn and stare. Because those are all signs of like, hey, ow, be careful back there. That's not feeling so hot. Right. And I feel like sometimes that's where people get nipped, right? Where when you really see that came out of nowhere, those are really the ones that kind of do come out of nowhere. If you've missed it, they're painful.
Aaron, licking of furniture, sudden, then persistent lick of bed, pillows, couches, big wet spots. Yeah, that's a tummy issue because you know what? My little old dog just was doing a lot of that. He does have some tummy issues. So I would definitely, maybe a probiotic or something, but I'd maybe see your vet and see if that's that sudden licking of furniture and pillows and stuff. Usually, with my guy, it was his stomach was, not doing so great. So that's why.
I think it can also be a sign of anxiety as well. Right? I mean, so definitely getting your vet to sort of check that out. Although Aaron, I think if this is Fiona that we're talking about, she's recently been put on some Prozac, and that can make your tummy feel pretty darn icky for a little while it regulates into your system. So if this started in conjunction with the meds, if this is the dog you're talking about, you know, it can pass. I would talk to your vet about some famotidine, which is actually Pepsid. Okay. And just see if maybe that can kind of help ease those tummy issues for a little while.
Until she gets used to it.
Yep. But it could be food as well. So don't rule that out. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So definitely look at that because my guy was a tummy issue for sure. And so once I addressed that, then that got better. So.
Yep. And remember too, guys, right? Like, as we tell you all this stuff, we're going on our own experiences. Neither one of us are veterinarians, right? No. We've just had a lot of dogs and we've seen a lot of dogs. So we're just trying to give you like, hey, maybe this is what you look into, or maybe this is the things that you watch so you can have better information to tell your veterinarian.
Right. And also it's really so that when you go when you're training or working with your dog, you can be aware of other things that could be causing some of the problem, right? So it's not only, oh, I'm having a training problem. You just want to make sure that you look at the whole dog and make sure that you're aware of the whole thing before you try to, go through some processes that maybe aren't going to help your dog. You might need to take care of that issue first, or the dog's not feeling well that day or whatever. So you really want to make sure that you're looking at the whole dog before you just decide, oh, we have a training issue, or he just doesn't like this, or he just doesn't like that, or he doesn't like tight spaces. Well, and if he didn't have a problem before, why does he now? Those are basically, we wanted to ask why this is happening. And a lot of times then you can kind of look at some of those other things that we may not think about looking at. So, it's not. So we just want you to create some awareness about this kind of stuff, that it could be different things, or those sudden behaviors like dogs. Certain things are not normal, right? A dog would not be 4 or 5 years old, being great, no problem. And they all of a sudden decide they're going to bite you. I mean, that's rare, right? That doesn't, I mean, and one, another Doberman, and I don't even have Dobermans. And I have a lot of Doberman stories. I had a Doberman that come in. She was fine for 2 weeks. Came into back to training class. She was so lunging and barking, and just it was like it was a completely different dog. And sure enough, she had a brain tumor. So it was organic, and they had to let her go. And this is a young couple that had recently adopted the dog, had her for several months. And unfortunately, the dog had a brain tumor, which caused that behavior change. Right? It's like she was the sweetest, most loving dog, and then all of a sudden became Cujo. It just doesn't work like that. Usually, dogs don't, and that's why I always ask, well, was it that way as a puppy? Was it that way did it always do that? Was always worried about this and that? Asking the questions. That's why sometimes for some of the people we see, we ask a lot of questions, and they're like, oh my God, why? Why does that matter? Because we want to make sure that there's nothing else that we missed, or a medical situation that maybe we need to have addressed before we start working, because it is unfair. And I know I can speak for both of us here. We're not going to take your money if it's a medical problem, because there's nothing we can do to help you until the medical situation is taken care of.
Yep. Yeah, I got hired to do an assessment of a Vizsla that it was peeing everywhere, and they just couldn't get the behavior under control. And I mean, I remember walking to that house like, I'm like, I can't behaviorally assess your dog because he's sick. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, he's very ill. Right. And it ended up the dog had a huge bladder tumor that was inoperable, and they had to go all the way to Des Moines to get it diagnosed. It was really bad. Like, but, it made me sad, because it's like, you want to help a dog, but we can't. I mean, that's not our expertise. We can't help medical stuff, right? You got to go to the right place. So, Jill, she said her dog also had a tummy issue, and she gets a pencil and a Fortiflora every day. And I was like, a pencil? She goes, oh no, Pepsid. Sorry, I thought that was funny.
Yeah, pencil. Oh,
That's why I was like, I don't really think that's good for the
that
gut.
sounds a little painful just in and of itself.
I hope you're feeding bread with that pencil. So yeah, Jill, please remind everyone what basics to have in your doggy prescription cabinet. That's actually a really good one.
Yeah.
So I could tell, I have a little zippy thing, and I can tell you what I have in mine. I have hydrogen peroxide. I have gauze and vet wrap. I actually have a kind of a soft cloth that can be used for a muzzle, if you know how to tie it correctly. I have Gas X in the house because I have big dogs. So, you know, bloat is always one of those things that I am never going to let out of my mind. I have Benadryl in case they get stung by a bee. You know, get those Hy-Vee things. Let's see, what else do I have? I do have Pepsid. I have that here. What else? What am I missing?
Hydrogen peroxide, Pepsid. Yeah, and Judy's right. Hydrogen peroxide should be fresh. I found out the hard way.
It doesn't have to be, but it's going to be a really horrible experience for your dog if it's not.
A slip lead. Yep.
Yeah.
No, Gas X doesn't cure bloat, but it just reduces the doesn't cure bloat. I wish that would be awesome, but
no. If the stomach has not torsed yet, right, you can remove some of that gas on your way to the emergency clinic, right? It can help to just be enough where they might just need the tube to get the gas out, as opposed to the stomach will turn. So it doesn't cure it, absolutely not. But like I said, it's kind of one of those like emergency things to do on your way to the emergency vet. Yeah, Imodium, that's another one I forgot of. Although
Imodium is great.
Sue, that's a really good one. But however, don't rely on Imodium for diarrhea, right? Like you can give it to stop it if it seems really bad. But if you're given Imodium after pretty much 24 hours, you really need to go in and see someone.
Right. It's good if it's something mild, yes, for sure. Nail clippers. Yep. And Debbie McMahon, that was a really good point. So this is a really good, you guys. So when she has a lovely dog, I think she's 9 or 10 now. She had a puppy. She couldn't do a sit, and this is a really good a sit to a down, and she struggled to go up three stairs at now. 3 stairs. She ended up having hip dysplasia. So this is where you guys that train some obedience or are doing obedience training, when a dog, you know, sit is a pretty easy thing, and the dog is having trouble with that, something's not right. That's usually, dogs aren't just, oh, he's just stubborn. No, probably not, but I just can't.
Right. Or this is the other thing that I've been seeing a little bit more of lately in real young puppies or dog class. Now, young puppies, it's okay. You don't want to see the same leg all the time, but when you know, a really well put together dog has a sit where those legs are right underneath of them, right? So when you get that real sloppy sit, kind of what I call it, where they're like that legs kind of kicked out to the side, or you know, they're always rolling over on a hip whenever they're sitting. Again, with real young puppies, they don't have a lot of muscle tone yet. But if that doesn't correct itself, I mean, x-rays are money, but it never ever hurts just to get something checked out. Like, hey, could you just wondering what's going on back here? Like, can you check the muscle tone? Can you check the bones? Just make sure everything's set where it's supposed to be. Because I'll tell you, if you can find a good rehab vet and you have, you know, something like that, and you could build up really good muscle tone, the muscles can actually help to a little bit, right? Help to correct structure by holding things in the proper place as the dog grows, as opposed to, you know, not, and then letting it go wherever. So the quicker you can get on something like that, the better. It might not fix it, but it's certainly not gonna hurt.
Yeah. And also oh my God, I lost it. Oh, yeah. Usually if you guys get your dogs spayed or neutered at a later age, which a lot of people are doing now, that's the time to get your hips checked. Even if you're not seeing any problems. I did for both of my dogs. right? Or all of my dogs, just to see what's going on in the rear. Oh, and going back to that, my little beagle that lived a nice long life was mildly dysplastic in one hip. So what we did to treat that is we kept that hip, the muscle around it, very, very strong. And so she never needed surgery or anything like that. And she lived her whole life, 18 years um, with mild hip dysplasia and didn't need any surgery or anything like that. So yeah, it's it's uh it's important.
Yeah, kaopectate. I
don't
wouldn't.
know. No.
I mean, I have not heard of that being great, so I would not. I would ask your vet if that's something that you want to try and give, but I think there's safer items
Right.
than that, right?
And Roberta brings a great point. Those of you who do dog sports, before you start on a dog sport, or as people get your dogs, it is great to get those x-rays and stuff and get baseline. Get also baseline blood work as well. So that if something's off, they're gonna catch it sooner. So doing some of the preliminary stuff is really important, especially if you're asking him to do a lot of a big physical sport. So even though most people don't think nose work as a physical sport, I can tell you today's trial, stamina for the dog, long walks and all that are part of nose work. Being able to go up, move their head, their neck, and all that, it matters a lot. So just because they're not, a lot of people think, oh, it's nose work, they don't have to worry about their fitness. That's absolutely not true at all. If they're not fit or they're not in a great place, they're going to have trouble for sure.
Yep. Yeah, Mary. So preventative dental health. I think you should always be looking at your dog's teeth, right? Whether or not you're someone who chooses to brush or whatever. My dog, they love to chew. So, and I look at their teeth all the time. The bones that they chew really, truly seem to keep tartar at bay. But I know, like, there are certain breeds, especially if you have a toy breed or a really small dog, man. Yeah, you're getting dentals all the time because their teeth are going to fall out.
Yeah.
Yeah. They just have genetic issues with teeth. So, and you're absolutely right. Like I said, in nosework class, one of the ones that I found was an abscessed tooth because the dog was searching very weird. She just didn't feel very good. And one of those signs too, if you really have bad teeth, is if your dog's breath smells like what's coming out the other end, oh my gosh, get them in for a dental because that is some bad bacteria in the mouth. So
Right. So, and that's what I mean. Those of you, especially those of you that are asking your dog to do physical sports or any sport, I think it's really important that you make sure they're physically in the best condition possible to be able to do that job. Because it's no different than if somebody wants me to run a marathon and I'm going to get up right now and go do that. It's not going to work because it's not going to happen.
I'll visit you in the hospital.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So you definitely want to make sure that whatever sport you're asking your dog to do, that they're in really good physical shape. And I know most of us that do dog sports do recognize, they're a little helicopter that way. Every little thing, every little change in the dog's behavior or even physical, the way they move, they're at the vets and we're checking to see what's going on. And that's important because, and I have to say, I attribute to that because a lot of our dogs are very long lived. They live really long lives, more often than their counterparts that don't really do too much. Not always. There's always an exception to everything. But most of my dogs have lived to be 18, 50. I had a 80-pound lab that lived to be 15. And I had a beagle that was almost 18. I currently have a 17-year-old, a 12-year-old, and Chacha's 13 and a half, my shepherd. And she's in pretty good shape for a shepherd. But it's because the sooner you catch things or you notice things, the sooner you can get it taken care of before it becomes a big, expensive thing. It could be a small thing that you can fix early on. And you notice those things more because you're doing so much more with them, training and all that stuff. So you notice those changes.
And I think too, like even agility or nose work, right? You have a class that's also watching your dog. And so sometimes, right, if it's not the trainer, when the dog, hey, your dog looks kind of slow today. What's going on? Right. So everyone has eyes on their dog. Because don't feel bad, guys. When you live with them, it's kind of like watching your puppy grow, right? Like I see some that come to class from week to week and I'm like, oh my gosh, he had a growth spurt. And they're like, really? But when you live with them, you don't see the changes when you take a break and see them once a week or every couple of days, those types of things. So
yeah, definitely. Tango, leave the comment.
Aaron had a question a way back that I think, Aaron, I think this might be a whole other topic really, but what have you seen that might be attributed to emotional and mental well-being? Her dog has barrier aggression, but can also be clingy and just jealous or sulky if the other dogs in the house get a pet. Wonder if there's a link. Yeah, probably. Right. If your dog has spatial issues or is resource guarding you, that could also definitely be some of those things. But again, emotional and mental well-being, sometimes, yes, they're very connected.
Yeah. And they can't talk to us about it either.
Right. But, is it connected to a health issue? I don't know. Right. I think that's just one of those where you sort of have to check the rest of his life, if it's only happening in certain situations and it seems to be towards other dogs, I'm going to say probably not. I mean, it's probably more something, emotional.
Right. But, and that's what I mean. All we're trying to get across is, just as things change, or if you notice behavior changes that maybe you're not crazy about, you definitely want to make sure that it's nothing that it's not anything that's health or, or medical before you start, addressing the behavior, the training part or the behavior part, because sometimes you can, then you're going to be throwing money at something that you can't really fix because there's a medical problem behind it. So,
Right.
Because it's very, very, it becomes very, I can't tell you how many people come in, oh, I have this and that problem, and it's really something simple and medically treatable, and you can just take care of it that way. And not that training, you can't get fixing things through training, but you definitely want to, that's a part you want to look at. And the other thing is like the emotional, and if you feel physically well, hopefully you're more emotionally, in a good place, right, to be able to handle more. But if you're not feeling well, a lot of things come from that. So
Yep, Cheryl. I think if you do have a vet that you can send emails and videos to about stuff that you're seeing, it absolutely helps them. And I know, like, even for Nancy and I as trainers, right, sometimes you go in and they're like, well, they don't do it here. And you're like, okay, send me a video, right? Like, what are they? And then you see it and you're like, well, that's interesting,
right.
So I just actually shared with Nancy, I had a review of a private lesson I did. And I was like, what do you think about these two dogs? Because I'm not going to tell you, do you think the same thing I do? And we did kind of come up with the same answer, but right. It's just interesting when you get to see those things that you're not there in real life for, that are captured. So especially for, orthopedic stuff, but even behavior stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, video is a wonderful thing. If you can capture some of the behavior on video, it saves a lot of. It's easier for us to figure out stuff, right?
Yeah. So I think for me, one of my big goals, and I think a lot of you guys know this already, but just in case you don't, if your dog is doing things like vomiting, diarrhea, licking, not wanting to get up, just those big changes, or even sometimes they're subtle, but right, get your dog to the vet, right? It's just those things just aren't really things to wait on. The body trying to expel something is pretty serious. I mean, and if it can't do it and it's feeling the need to continue, you could have something very seriously wrong. So, right, really, truly visit your vet. Don't wait. Because what's the worst? You spent a vet visit, maybe some blood work, maybe some x-rays to know that your dog's fine. Worth its weight in gold, right? I mean, I know we've all been there to say, I would have spent quadruple that if, to find out my dog was okay when they weren't. So
Right. And as your dogs get older, you know, it's those things become even more magnified as they get older and more, you know, it's bad when a 4-year-old vomits and has diarrhea, but when a 13-year-old has it, it's a whole different ballgame because that could
right.
be something. Right, and and then that's what I mean. You want to make sure they're in good health because then if you keep putting your dog, and we see it too a lot, Cheryl. The dogs aren't feeling well or they're not doing well, and people are still putting them in trials, and the dogs aren't doing well. They're not titling or they're not because they're not feeling well. So yeah, if you're going to compete, make sure your dog's in tip-top shape. Not to say that at some point, sometimes your dog might be having a bad day. They may not be feeling well. Just like we do, we have days we feel better than others. But if we moreover really take care of and making sure that they're in good shape, usually you won't have that issue. And then it'll be more fun and they're feeling much better about it. So.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll just sort of leave you with a story about one of my older dogs. We were in NW3s, and we had, I think, 4 or 5 trials where he would hit a hide, and then it's like he was just like, what? He would totally go off into La La Land, and I was like, that's odor. Are you sure, buddy? And he's like, no, there's nothing there. And then he might find another hide in the room, and I was like, something is wrong with my dog. Like, I didn't know what. I had him into the vet for blood work. I had him checked over. He wasn't presenting any other physical signs at all. And this was probably 3 months of time, right? And finally, I went in. I was like, I need a full panel. I need a urinalysis. I need this. And they were like, whoa, slow down. I'm like, so, and he ended up having like a really nasty bladder infection. So I think a lot of what was happening was, the bacteria in that bladder infection was messing with his brain a little bit and the processing. So I was talking to a surgeon friend of mine back then, and he said in humans, bladder infections in seniors is one of the highest misdiagnoses of dementia is when they have a bladder infection, because it has that much impact on the brain if it's a severe infection. So it's interesting. Mm-hmm. So we got him all fixed up, and yay, we passed another trial. But it's funny just how something super small that's not presenting itself in any other way, right, can show up. So yeah, Deb, psychosis for sure, right? Mm-hmm. So it's I'm telling you guys, we don't even understand humans 100%. How are we going to understand animals and how all they can't even talk to us?
Yeah, and they can't communicate. Like, I'm not feeling well. I'm this, I'm that. It's just not, we have to be able to, and this is where the goal of these Facebook Lives and the goals of my business and Joanne's business is to really get to understand your dogs better, so that these things are just normal for people, and they're not, unfortunately. So we're trying to kind of just create awareness around it, like check your dog's physical well-being, make sure that's on point, so that then you can address all the other stuff. Because if you're not healthy, if there's no health, and that goes for people too, doesn't matter. Health is number one, and everything else is built around that. But if you have your health isn't good, or your dog's health isn't, you're trying to train an animal that's not well. It's awful for both parties, for the human and for the dog.
Yep. And I think the secondary, along with, right, both of us trying to get you to understand your dog better, is to trying to make a better life for the dog through understanding. We all love our dogs, don't get me wrong, right? But sometimes you're like, oh my gosh, just come on. What is wrong with you? You know what I mean? Instead of like, you wouldn't do that to grandma. You know what I mean?
Right.
Come on. What is taking you so long to get up? Let's go. So it sounds so silly when you put it that way, but right, we sometimes lose our patience with our dogs, not to be mean, just because we don't pay enough attention sometimes. And so it's just a way to keep this as a normal thought in your head, as opposed to, oh, I'm so sorry, I wish I would have noticed that 3 weeks ago,
just to always be looking for it, and
right.
Always being aware of what your dog's habits are, and kind of know what's normal and typical for your dog. So when it's abnormal, it's easy to see it. So and even so much as you guys, one of the things you really want to look for, what does your dog look like when it's getting up from lying down, when it's getting up from a nap? How does that look every day, right? How does that look? How does your dog look when it sits? How about, can it goes from a sit to a down? How does your dog look when they do those basic things? Because I'm telling you that, or does your dog, sometimes I ask this question and people are like, why do you care? Does your dog lie down? Especially if I see something that's structural, I ask, does your dog lie down more or sit more? And then you hear people, well, I think he does both. And then after a few ticks, you're like, wait, he does lie down more. And there's usually a reason for that. So those are the kind of things, right? Notice how, does your dog sit more? Does it do an average of both? It should be a pretty good balance of all, lying down, sitting, depending on the activity. But if all of a sudden you notice your dog's lying down more, that wasn't doing it before, why not? Or, is it owie? Did it hurt himself by running around and things like that? So those are all, that's what I mean. Just notice the little things in their behavior, so that way when something's not quite right, it'll be quick and more inexpensive than waiting until it gets really bad.
Yep. And and two, how fast do they eat? How do they chew? Right? Do they have a certain side of their mouth that they chew on? I just noticed the Doberman this week chewing. He was sort of chewing on toys and food in one side of his mouth, and sure enough, he has a weird spot. So we're going to be calling the vet tomorrow to try and get in and get that looked at. So it's just, I'm telling you, the more that you can pay attention, I hate to say the cheaper it is, because you might be at the vet a little bit more. But in the long run, right, the healthier your dog will remain, okay, over the longevity of their life. So what chewing labs?
Yeah, honey. Amen, sister. My lab doesn't chew.
So Jill, the day your lab starts to actually chew the food, you're like, what's wrong with you?
Yes. Then you can rush the lab to the vet when it starts chewing his food. He'll probably look at you like you're nuts. But that would be a thing. I'm sure something's going on. So anyway, all right. So that's all I wanted. That's what our goal was for this little. There's so many things we can talk about behavior wise that can structure and everything. And we are planning on doing one on structure. We just have to make sure we're both home to be able to do it.
Right.
Yes, that is true, Deb. It's harder to keep track of subtle than that's why shooting a video of your dog every so often is really, really helpful. So.
Yes, Cheryl. Ours is actually closed part of the time. We only have one big one here, and they've lost so much staff. They now aren't even open 24/7, not 24/7, but they're not even open every night of the week. Sometimes they refer us here to ones that are an hour and a half away.
Yeah, Cheryl, we're having some big, for emergency rooms. That's why trying to keep everybody healthy is really very challenging. So.
Yep. And I'm sure it's not you guys either, but I will just say this. Our emergency center, one night, somebody didn't see their dog fast enough, so they went into the bathroom and they flooded their bathroom. They put a bunch of paper towels down there. So now you have to take tech and staff away to clean up all the water in the lobby from somebody flooding their bathroom, right? So if you have friends, it's just a really horrible industry to be in right now. People are mean, and so be kind to your vets. Tell all your friends, be kind to your vets, because man, the day they're not here for us, I don't know what we'll do when you have a real emergency.
Right.
So
right. All right, guys, have a great night.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Yeah.